What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Directed by James Mangold, who wrote this film alongside 3 other writers. This film once again stars Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones alongside people like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, John Rhys-Davies, Toby Jones, Mads Mikkelsen, Antonio Banderas, and many more. So before we get too far into this, I want to say a big thanks to all of you kind folks for clicking here on my ugly face to hear my thoughts on the newest Indiana Jones film. If you guys haven't already checked it out, I recently, earlier this week, did a video, a live stream where I discussed all 4 Indiana Jones films that currently exist with my buddy Rashad of Rashad G Reviews. We got into full spoiler details and breakdowns about each individual film, talking about what we loved and didn't love about the films, and also talking about the legacy of these films for us. And I'm not going to sit here and waste too much of your time talking about that, but in case you didn't see that video, the first 3 Indiana Jones films in particular are some of the most pivotal films in my life when it comes to falling in love with film. They're movies that absolutely helped shape my love for film alongside the original Star Wars trilogy, and without a doubt I wouldn't be who I am today without those original 3 Indiana Jones films. And even though a lot of people hate Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, while I do think it is the weakest one of the bunch, I always have a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun with it when I originally saw it in theaters, and I have a lot of fun with it when I still watch it today. And so I was incredibly excited for a new installment into the Indiana Jones franchise, and not only a new installment, but the definitive final film for Harrison Ford in the titular role, and hopefully the last Indiana Jones film in general, because I would hate to see them recast this role at any point in the future. And when this movie was first announced, I was obviously sad, I think like many, to hear that Steven Spielberg would no longer be in the director's chair, as he did direct the first 4 films. And while people may have felt a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth because of the 4th film, I would have still loved to have seen him come back in the director's chair to direct another Indiana Jones film. This is also the first film in the franchise to not have George Lucas involved in the writing department, which is also pretty sad for me as a diehard Star Wars fan. But with all that said, I am happy to say that John Williams once again does return to do the musical composition, the musical score for this film, and as usual, John Williams absolutely delivers a beautiful score that of course has tons of those iconic Indiana Jones themes that are reprised over the course of the film, as well as some new stuff. And one of the things I love about hearing John Williams over the decades is that when you go back and watch the original Indiana Jones trilogy, you can hear a lot of that similar style that he had for the original Star Wars trilogy. And when you watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you can definitely hear that vibe that he had at that time that you would also hear in things like the Star Wars prequels or even like the earlier Harry Potter films. So now, all these years later, being able to hear him still being an incredible composer, it's pretty amazing to hear his sound in this film, this Indiana Jones film, that sounds pretty consistent with the sound that we'd hear in the current or the sequel Star Wars trilogy. So yeah, I just love seeing how his sound is so consistent yet also changes over the decades. But with all that said, let's get into my thoughts on this film, directed by James Mangold. And when I heard that he was directing the film, I was absolutely ecstatic because I really love his films like Logan and Ford v Ferrari and many others. I think that he's a really great director, and he's just a visionary that I was really excited to hear that was attached to something like Indiana Jones, especially since this was pretty much spoken to be the final one for Harrison Ford. I figured this would kind of get a Logan treatment in a way. I knew it wasn't going to be obviously as dark or serious, but I was very happy to hear that he was going to be the director of a tale like this. And for the most part, I think that James Mangold directs this film pretty solidly. I think that the film looks great. There's a lot of great, really well put together sequences over the course of the film. It's very well shot. There's tons of great lighting, and just overall visually and just the way the movie is structured, I think is really solid, and I definitely got to give James Mangold a lot of praise for that. And of course, Harrison Ford returning in the title role of Indiana Jones. I think he was absolutely fantastic in this film. And one of the main criticisms that people had of the fourth film was the fact that he was doing a lot of these big over-the-top stunts. The character was doing a lot of big action, and it didn't feel as believable anymore because Harrison Ford was already getting up there in age. And in the case of this film, he's definitely substantially further in the aging process. And I like that this film at least pokes some fun at it and does reference the fact that he's aging, where at the beginning of this film we see that he's actually retiring from teaching. He's just retiring in general, and he's ready to kind of, live a more kicked back life. Now, I'm not going to get into deep spoilers as far as the narrative here, but I will be touching on some of the things we saw in the trailers and marketing material up to this point. So that's your warning if you want to go in with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever, but I will be steering clear of any big spoiler things or stuff that just really wasn't shown in the trailer. But the basic gist of this movie is the movie opens and Indiana Jones, he's deciding he no longer wants to be a professor. He no longer wants to teach kids anymore. We're in the 70s when this movie opens, if I'm not mistaken. He kind of wants to put those years behind him. And after many years, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, his goddaughter, ends up popping into the story, pretty much kind of reigniting this journey for this thing called the Dial of Destiny that she's now gotten herself involved in, and he ends up going on an adventure with her to get this thing before some Nazis do. It's a pretty classic Indiana Jones tale. I won't get too deep into all the specifics and all the character relationships, but that's the general gist. And the main villain that we have in this film is played by Mads Mikkelsen, who is really great in the role. Gives us a very familiar performance that we've seen him give as far as villain performances, but for the most part, I think he really has a lot of fun in the role, very consistent with him as an actor, but pretty solid. He has a main sidekick alongside a couple other sidekicks, but his main sidekick in the film is played by Boyd Holbrook, who, similar to Mads Mikkelsen, gives a very familiar performance for him when it comes to playing villains. And as can be seen in the trailer, one of the coolest things beyond the return of Harrison Ford is also the return of John Rhys-Davies as the character of Sallah. While he isn't a ginormous part of this film narratively, it was really nice to see him once again. It was nice to spend some time with that character, and there was definitely a lot of moments in this film that made me feel nostalgic for those original Indiana Jones films, and plenty of moments with the music and just small little references that definitely put a smile on my face. Overall, I'm happy to say that I really enjoyed Dial of Destiny. I found it to be a really fun time with some great action sequences, some overall just some spectacle, and some moments that definitely put a smile on my face, as I mentioned before, because of nostalgia and references to where this franchise has been before. But if I had to be completely honest, I would say I almost like this film just as much as I enjoyed Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And like I said, I do enjoy that film. I would almost argue that I feel Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even though it's a bit ridiculous with its antics at times, is a far more entertaining film, whereas this one takes a far more slower approach to things, a bit of a more grounded kind of approach to Indiana Jones once again. And while it does have the big over-the-top moments that definitely ask you to suspend your disbelief, it's a movie that isn't as ridiculous as Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but at times can be a little bit slower in its pacing and sometimes a little bit more convenient in the way that the story does play out. This is a film that is a little bit more dialogue heavy. This is a film that is a little bit more character heavy, which I did enjoy in a lot of ways, but I also felt like it was a little bit overly long at times. There are definitely moments throughout the course of the runtime where I easily could have trimmed out this or that, and by the time the movie was over, clocking in at a little bit over 2.5 hours, I felt like this movie probably could have cut out at least 20 to 30 minutes of the film. And my biggest gripe I had with this movie, without a doubt, was a big sense of convenience, specifically around the villains. This is something we've seen in this franchise before, but one of the most annoying things about this film was that this film has plenty of chase sequences throughout the course of the movie that were all really staged well and exciting to watch, but often kind of ended with a similar feel and vibe. Our characters would escape the villains, they'd kind of create some plan, they'd end up finding out the next piece of the puzzle that they need to get to where they need to get to for this discovery, for this adventure that they're on. And then once they get there, shortly after or about the same time, the villains would be there with them, and it just felt like this situation situation where they were escaping the villains, they themselves were figuring out how to get to the next place, what to do in that next situation, the next piece of the puzzle, as I said. And then shortly after arriving there, you know, the villains who they just escaped or harmed or whatever the case may be are there and causing a problem once again. And it often kind of had me scratching my head as to how the villains knew exactly where they were at every turn. And that was just a frustrating part of the story that often felt a bit redundant, as shortly after that would happen, they would find a means to escaping the villains once again, and then we kind of get back into the cycle. That's not to say that it wasn't enjoyable to watch, at least, because you do have some fun humor and action and well-staged sequences throughout all of that. It's definitely a fun time, but there was definitely a lot of convenience when it came to incorporating the villains in the narrative. Now, one character I haven't spoken about too much here is the character of Teddy, a young boy who gets involved in the story that has history with Phoebe Waller-Bridges' character, played by Ethann Isidore. And I thought he was, you know, well acted for the most part for a young boy actor, for like a teenage actor. And I saw this kid on the red carpet. I saw some videos of him and he seemed ecstatic to be a part of this. He seemed so thrilled and just happy to be a part of this entire experience. And so I don't want to take a dump on this kid in any way, shape, or form. He's a young kid who got to be in an Indiana Jones film. If I was his age and had had the same chance, I would have been absolutely through the roof. I think his performance was fine in the film, but the character oftentimes felt rather unnecessary, even though he was serviceable and definitely, you know, had moments in the film where he needed to have been there for the characters to have gotten in and out of certain situations. I just often felt like he was the one character that I felt I just wish really wasn't ever there, oftentimes kind of annoying me. And it's not really a jab at the young kid who plays him, just more so how the character was written and his involvement at all. But with all that said, there isn't a whole bunch I can really say on the film at this point without getting into spoilers. Overall, I enjoyed it. I found it to be a good, fun ride with some great nostalgic moments, a lot of references, and things that I think are going to put big smiles on the faces of Indiana Jones fans. I think if you're looking for something that's a little bit more grounded like the original 3 films and less so like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you're definitely going to enjoy this film maybe more than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I would say that my negatives and positives of both films kind of put them in a similar place for me, just in different ways. I feel like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even with its insane antics, is a little bit more of an entertaining film, whereas this one was more grounded and more character based, but oftentimes was a little bit more slow, a little bit more boring in small moments. There were elements that my mind was saying, oh, we probably could have cut this out. Oh, this feels a little bit unnecessary from time to time. But the film was visually enticing to watch. There was a lot of fun there for me. There was a lot of moments, again, that put a smile on my face as an Indiana Jones fan. And it was also really nice to see a far more practical effects and practical locations and costumes used in this movie. While there are some big CG heavy moments and a lot of green screen that is utilized throughout the course of the film, it's not as blaringly obvious as something like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And there was far more moments in this film where they were using practical sets and locations that gave you a little bit more of that vibe that you expected from the first 3 films that we get here. But for the most part, I think the first 3 films are going to consistently be some of the best movies ever made, with the 4th and 5th just being entertaining rides for me that incorporate a character that is absolutely deep in my heart. So with all that said, I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say, so leave any and all comments down below. Did you guys like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, or was it another stinker for you in this franchise? Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say about it, so leave any and all comments down below. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video, because it does help the channel out. Subscribe for more videos and more coverage on films, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.